All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to give things a minute here just for anyone else to come in. But yeah, just kind of sit back and relax, and we're going to begin shortly. Okay, so I think we can start now. And I just want to give kind of a big welcome and thank you for coming to this presentation. My name is Hagar Youssef. I work as an academic development specialist in the Engineering Academic Success Center. We're located just in the Engineering Student Center. I also wanted to introduce my colleague Janelle Ward, who's also here today. She is an academic advisor. She's here to kind of help students in terms of normally in her role in terms of like questions regarding course requirements and such. So when you come into academic advising, you'll probably run into her. So thank you so much, Janelle. So I guess just kind of getting things started here. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about things regarding navigating your engineering program, as well as stuff like scheduling in academics, as well as the support and resources that we have available for our students. So big place to start would be, what do I need to know? So one thing we really like to encourage our students to do is please remember to use your UCalgary email address. So anytime you're communicating with anyone at the university, whether that's your instructor or even like university offices, such as the advising office in engineering, the university actually requires that any of that sort of communication comes from your UCalgary email address. So please remember to start using that and start using it consistently. Another thing we recommend is putting your UCID in your email signature. And the reason for that is, especially if you're coming in for like an advising question, it's really helpful for us to be able to kind of look you up in the system. So if you can actually go into Outlook, there's a setting where you can actually preset your email, preset your signature in your email. So it's really easy to just make it so that every email is signed off with your full name, your UCID. And another point we want to make is please check your email regularly. So throughout the semester, just because sometimes like alerts on D2L from your professor will show up in your inbox, so you know to check. But also when you're not in courses, say during the spring and summer, because that's when we send out the academic review emails. And that's just kind of letting you know, whether you're in good standing and no problems essentially ahead. But it's a really good idea to just make sure to remember to check your email regularly, even when you're like on break from school, just even if it's once a month, please remember to check your email. Cannot stress this enough. So by next week, you will have access to the Engineering Student Center D2L page. So this is a really useful resource, and this is going to be something that you can use not just as a first-year engineering student, but it's going to be there for you throughout your time here at the University of Calgary. So some things to kind of keep note of. So in the news section, that's where we post things like if there's updated advising hours. Sometimes we post like things about events, volunteer opportunities, or even like practicum opportunities. So there's all sorts of stuff that gets posted to that, all of which are applicable to our engineering students. So it's a good thing to keep checking that regularly. Something I really want to point your attention to, though, is this section that I've highlighted, which is the content section. And the reason that I am pointing that part out is because that's where a lot of the information that we have regarding just frequently asked questions and all sorts of other information on our program is located. And something I recommend doing if you have the time is just taking the time to kind of explore that content section, poke around and see what it is that we have answers for, because oftentimes you'll find that a lot of the information we have there is directly relevant to you and your program progression. And this is kind of a sneak peek into that content section. So as you can see here, there's a lovely little table of contents where we have all sorts of different sections. You would probably benefit from looking at this first year engineering resources section. And in that section, we have things like your block schedule. So in case you wanted to like double check your schedule, you can find that under this page. We also have this little section called Engineering 101, and it has a couple of different videos that go over different resources offered on campus and just different aspects of the program that students might often have questions about. So definitely worth taking a look and seeing, what videos are there. We also have this section here called program placement. So not something you have to worry about quite yet, but maybe in your second semester or so of engineering, this is where you're going to find information on how getting into a major works. So if you wanted to read up ahead of time on that, this is a good place to look. Another nice thing about this section is we actually have information and different video recordings of professionals in each of the engineering majors we offer, just sort of talking about, what there is to study in that major, potential careers. So it's a really great resource if you're still kind of undecided about which major you want to go into. I definitely recommend looking at that. And then other things that we have on here, once you're second year and up, the prerequisite guides will be useful. First year, you've already got your courses mapped out, but later in time, they will be you will need to register for your own courses after your second year, and these will be very helpful for that. We also have information on things like study abroad, if that was something you're interested in and wanted to start thinking about, exam information, and really there's even more that was just sort of cut off from the screenshot. So again, I highly recommend just taking the time at some point to look through the different stuff in the content section of the Engineering Student Center, because there is a lot there. And hopefully it'll answer most of your questions. And for any remaining questions you have, you're of course welcome to come into advising. So another thing we wanted to talk about is the first year D2L schedule. So while you're going to be in the Engineering Student Center D2L, you're also going to be in a D2L shell specifically for our first year students. And it's going to be called SSE First Year Engineering 2022. So like with the other D2L page, any news posted here is going to be relevant, particular to our first year. So it's good to make sure you're up to date with that. We also have another content section that, again, I highly recommend looking at. This content section is much more first year focused. So it has all sorts of stuff on the first year schedules, as well as the different resources that we have offered to our students on campus. Because we know that, as a first year coming in, you're still adjusting to the whole university environment. So if at any point you're not sure about what sort of academic support there is, or just even supports in general, yeah, you can check out this D2L page and just hit the content section. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the block schedule, particularly in the first week of classes. So this is posted again in that first year D2L shell. And from looking at it, you might notice that the schedule is slightly different from the usual weeks. And the reason for that is that the first week is almost, it's kind of, we view it almost as an introduction, both to, of course, the engineering courses, as well as the structure of our engineering program. So I highly recommend, making sure that before September 6th, you take the time and look through this document to make sure that you're in the right place for Tuesday morning, because we're going to have some specialized programming for that week that revolves around both engineering content and just kind of how to transition into university in general. And this is going to be a a document that I think all of you are familiar with at this point, which is your block schedules. So I'm sure you've all taken a look at this point. You've been registered into your classes and you have, all of your courses laid out here. So regarding this page, I think, that this document had a couple of sheets. So this is the page that lays out exactly which courses you're going to be in at which times and which room you're going to be in. So it's important for that. But I think you're all aware kind of that your courses are kind of either blocked off in the morning or in the afternoon. But what's important about that is we want you guys to keep in mind that being a student is actually akin to a full-time job. So what that tends to mean in terms of schedules and academics is that that schedule really shows about a third of the actual time commitment we expect to see from you in your courses. So as a full-time student, essentially, this is like kind of a breakdown of the average time required. So when it comes to reviewing your lecture material and readings, that should take maybe 6 to 10 hours per week. Your study time should be about 15 to 20 hours weekly. And then any time spent on extra support. So generally around 1 to 3, but maybe more if that's what you need. And then, of course, you're going to have to figure out where to fit in your extracurricular activities because, of course, like as students, we're whole people. The academics are important, but we do realize that you guys are going to have, other things going on. That being said, along the lines of an engineering student being a full-time essentially job is that we expect about an average of 44 hours per week dedicated to engineering. So active learning, which is the way we've kind of structured our engineering, is meant to give you some flexibility to control your schedule, as well as to kind of prioritize and customize how it is that you spend your time. So going back to that kind of block schedule you received, so within that same document where it has your classes specifically laid out, we also had this section. So anytime you're having classes, that's your in-class active learning, right? But we also have a section blocked off, which is your self-directed and supported learning times. So essentially what we've tried to do here is schedule in kind of a good chunk of your study time. So again, if you're thinking about studying as a full-time job, this week kind of this layout really kind of puts it into place for you guys. And the reason we recommend that students be on campus for the self-directed and supported learning times is because we have a variety of different supports available on campus for our students to really bolster your learning and make the most out of that study time. So just as a quick kind of visualization of what active learning kind of looks like, at least for your first year of engineering. So you want to watch your lecture content before your active learning sessions. So on Mondays on campus, we're going to have live streaming sessions where you can watch lecture content with classmates. And these live streaming sessions are going to be facilitated by actually some of our upper year students who did really well in the courses. So they're there as essentially a support where, if while watching the lecture streaming, you come across a question or you're a little confused by the content, you will have that in-person support there. This is also the time where you should be taking your notes, as you're going through your lectures. And if you come across any course content that you find confusing or maybe things that you're not super sure about, you should definitely write those questions down and have them ready. So in your active learning sessions, so when you're kind of in the course with your professors and such, this is when you want to bring in any of those questions that you've saved that maybe our upper year students were maybe unable to help you with, or maybe that you just kind of want more clarification on. We also want you to prepare to be engaged and participate. So, please use your resources. Essentially, we have a lot in store for you guys and they're all completely free for students. So there shouldn't be any barriers for that. So another thing we want you guys to do is schedule in your study time. So again, we have a lot of times for your studying to be blocked off. And that's a great time to schedule a lot of your study time. So that's a good time to work on assignments, to come in for our peer assisted study sessions, which Janelle has already put a link in the chat. Many of our first year courses have peer assisted study sessions available. So those are great kind of group study sessions, completely free to participate in. They'll also be doing some midterm and final prep. So yeah, that's a great way to review course content and also kind of prepare for big tests and assignments. Again, we have the tutoring available. So our upper year students will be available every day of the week, or most days of the week, for every one of our first year courses. So every single one of our first year classes will have tutoring available. And again, this is completely free tutoring. So you are encouraged to attend. You could come alone, or you can bring a couple of friends if you guys all have the same questions. It's also a great time for closed book practice. And just to reiterate what that is, closed book practice is essentially mimicking the test environment when practicing. So for example, open book practice would be, doing some practice problems with your notes open as like something to refer to. Whereas closed book practice is you timing yourself like 5 minutes to finish a question as if you're in the exam and you cannot look at your notes. So we'll go more into that in a little bit, but another good thing to do during the study time is to review your concepts. And then lastly, again, use your resources. So our learning assistants, like I said, free tutoring. In that first year D2L shell, we do have the schedule for when tutoring is available. So definitely take a look at that. Again, peer assisted study sessions, study strategy appointments. So me and Destiny Dedimus, as the academic development specialists, we're happy to meet with students one-on-one, and we can kind of go over different study strategies and just figuring out like what works best for your own learning. So again, that's totally free and available to all students if you want. There's also office hours. So professors will put up office hours, and those are the times where they're essentially saying, yes, please come to me with questions. So please don't hesitate to use that. Makerspace has all sorts of really cool resources and facilities that are open to all our students. So I definitely recommend looking into that. And we also have a lot of really cool clubs and teams in our engineering faculty. And during clubs week and such, I think you're going to have a chance to learn more about those. But yeah, definitely recommend clubs and teams as a way to meet fellow students, as well as to kind of get some hands-on experiences with your engineering knowledge. So we're going to go into what effective learning strategies might be. So something students often tell us is that part of the transition from high school to university is kind of figuring out what study strategies are helpful for university learning versus high school learning, because the expectations of a university student and kind of the university like way of marking and grading students can be quite different from high school. So one thing to keep in mind when it comes to learning effectively, especially when you're doing like self-directed studying, is trying to create an effective study environment. So immediate environmental factors. So these are things like sound, temperature, light. So if, for example, you're trying to study in a coffee shop, is it like a really loud coffee shop or is it quiet? Do you study better in really bright sunlight or in duller light? It really kind of depends. And part of, I guess, being a student is figuring out what's most effective for you. Sociological factors can be things like, are you the type of person who studies better on their own, or do you actually like having other people around you? So another factor to take in is things like time of day, mobility. So these are all kind of based on, again, your own specific preferences as a learner. So some students study better early in the morning, whereas for other people, they study a lot better later in the evening. And again, these could be things that you're already aware of for yourself. But if not, it's always worth a try to kind of practice and see like, okay, when is my studying most effective? When am I getting the most work done? When do I feel motivated? And just kind of practicing and keeping your studying times in as effective an environment as possible. So we're going to talk also a little bit about self-regulated learning. So self-regulated learning is a cyclical process where students set goals, monitor their performance, and reflect on the outcome. So self-regulated learning is something that we actually all go through. It just might not necessarily be a conscious cycle. So explaining it in kind of the scientific terms is we start with it's a 3-stage process. So you start with the planning stage. So that's where you set an intentional goal and come up with a strategy. So if you're intentionally setting up a goal, you might come up with, well, during this study session, I want to finish this assignment. And to do so, I'm going to sit down and complete the last 6 problems. For example, if you've been doing this, maybe not consciously, you might have just had study goals like, oh, I want to study, for such and such class. The performance stage is when you're actually doing the task, actually going through the problem or the notes or whatever it is that you decided to do for that study session. And during this stage, usually you monitor your performance. So this could be something like you notice that you're getting through all the problems and you're doing really well. Or you might notice that you're not really motivated and you're not making a lot of progress. So that leads to the evaluation stage where you reflect on your performance and make changes for the future. So if you have a really awesome study schedule and you just did a great job, your reflection can just be like, I'm going to do this again next week for this course. If it's a course that maybe you're having some motivation on, your reflection might be, I'm really struggling with this content. What I'm going to do is take this material to one of the student tutors and go through it with them. And that's kind of how I'm going to tackle this difficult content. And the idea behind self-regulated learning is that it's a cycle. So once you've thought about, okay, that didn't go well, then you make a plan, or that did go well, I'll do it again. And that's your new plan. And essentially through every kind of task or goal we go through academically, we subconsciously go through this cycle. And it's just a good thing to keep in mind, especially when you're finding maybe that studying isn't going so well. That might be a good time to kind of sit down and say, okay, I'm at this performance stage and the task isn't getting done. So maybe I need to reflect and figure out a new plan. Another thing to keep in mind is what may have been effective in high school may not be effective in university. And the reason for that is oftentimes what is expected from high school learning is not necessarily the same as what is expected from university learning. So Bloom's taxonomy is a really great way of illustrating this. Oftentimes, up until secondary education, you tend to be more on the lower end of the triangle. So you might think back to high school assignments where maybe what you needed to do well in courses was remember certain content, whether that be defining things, memorizing certain things. You might have needed to understand some content where that's kind of going a bit deeper and explaining certain concepts. And sometimes, but not often, it could have led to application. So learning how to use that information in new situations. What students find though in university is that you're often moving up on the triangle. So you're going into things like analyzation. So that's when you're trying to actually draw connections among these different ideas. And then you're evaluating things maybe to like justify certain opinions or why you would support one theory over the other, to the point where you might actually lead to creation, which is where you've kind of surpassed all of these steps and you're producing something new and original in the field. So the tricky thing about this is that to be able to do, one of these upper level steps, you have to move up the pyramid. So in order to be able to analyze, you also have to already be able to apply, understand, and remember. And the tricky thing as well is that the strategies that work really well for, say, the remembering stage are actually different from the strategies that might work well for the understanding stage. So we kind of show you Bloom's taxonomy here just as a way to get you kind of thinking about the content, for example. So, if you're coming across new concepts, you have to think about, well, is this something that I need to remember? Or is it something that I'm actually going to have to, move to the application stage? And so you might want to change, how it is you're approaching material just based on where you think it's going to lie on this triangle. Another thing we want to point out is this good old curve of forgetting. So essentially, I think it's pretty illustrated pretty well in this, but the way the curve of forgetting goes is, say you learn something new one day, right? This is kind of the average time it takes for you to completely forget that thing. So by day 30, if you have not reviewed that thing that you learned about on day one, then chances are you're going to remember very little of it. You might remember like a couple of facts about it, but essentially that's lost over time. The idea, though, is that, if on the second day you take just 10 minutes to review what it is that you learned, then yeah, you're going to forget a little bit of it, but you're still going to retain some. And then if you actually take 5 minutes a week later just to review again, then you bring it back up. And again, yeah, you forget for a little bit, but you're never going like way back down to the bottom there. And then once you reach day 30, if you just take 2 to 4 minutes, then you actually again bring it back up. And, again, we still forget things over time, but essentially you're stopping yourself from reaching that bottom here. So the reason we pull this out is that we want to kind of encourage, when you have time, taking the time to kind of review content regularly when you can. And the idea is that, of course, as engineering students, you're going to be busy and you're going to be, juggling a lot of different content. So it's important to prioritize, of course, if you have urgent assignments or an upcoming exam, focus on those things. But if you have time that week, even if it's just a couple of minutes to do like a little bit of review, then you can actually kind of keep that material in mind longer. And what that means is that when you reach the final exams, you're not going to be reteaching yourself material that, you've just essentially forgotten because it's been a few months since you looked at it. Whereas, if you've taken the time to look at it at least once or twice again throughout the semester, you're going to be in pretty good shape for the final. So it's tricky because overall, it actually takes less time to, if you're doing the regular review, because you're saving yourself time at the end. So, instead of spending 15 hours reteaching yourself material, if you spent 30 minutes throughout the term kind of reviewing, you're in pretty good shape. The only catch is that it's a very, it's one of those things that you have to very consciously put into your schedule and consciously remember. So, when the time is there, we highly recommend, doing a little bit of review here and there, even if it's just like, okay, I'm going to do one practice problem for this concept. That can be really helpful. Another thing we wanted to kind of bring up is self-testing. So I talked a little bit about this earlier, but just to go over, so self-testing is a very specific type of studying. And we have it kind of split between like a regular study and practice session versus, a self-testing session. For regular study and practice, that might look like, any sort of location. It could be a noisy location, distracting, doesn't really matter where you sit. You'll have your notes, your textbook, your computer, all of that's there for you. This is a time where you can reach out to your friends, your professors, or your TAs. And you're also looking at practice problems. You're looking at the textbook review questions. You can reread like the notes you've got. You can take more notes if you need. You can do flashcards, and there's no time limit. So essentially, you can think of this just as the typical non-stressful study session, right? All your resources are at your disposal, and you're not necessarily limiting yourself. So when you want to do self-testing, that's when you're trying to mimic the test environment as much as possible. So you're trying to be in a quiet space away from a lot of different noise. When you're sitting down to do the self-testing, you're only going to use what's allowed in the actual test. So if you're allowed just a calculator and a pencil, then that's all you're going to have with you. No notes, none of that. It's also going to be a solo effort, so you're not going to, go up to your friends or anyone else to ask what they would recommend. You're also going to try to answer questions in the format of the actual test. So if you know that a test is going to be multiple choice, then you're going to want to find problems that are multiple choice for you to use as your self-testing problems. And then finally, you want it timed equal to the actual test. So for example, if you estimate that you're going to have 4 minutes per question during the actual exam, you're going to time yourself so that you're writing as if you're going to write that exam and you only have that amount of time to finish. So what's really important about self-testing is that it actually it tests your recall in a way that's studying open book does not. So I think we've all kind of had this experience where, you either read notes or you go through like a lecture video and everything just makes perfect sense, right? You're like, oh, I can do that problem. The steps make sense. It just seems so easy. That's your brain tricking you. This is actually a real effect that happens because essentially our brain likes to make all these connections as if we're the ones doing the problem. And watching an expert do the problem is always, it always makes it seem easy, right? The only really effective way to test your actual understanding is if you're going to sit down and go through that problem yourself, not looking at the textbook. And it's really important to do that as well, because it actually lets you know just how much you know the content. If you're able to do the problem even with your textbook away, then great. But oftentimes what'll happen is you'll get stuck because of course, the prof makes it look easy. They've got a PhD in engineering. They know what they're doing, right? You're a first-year student, and it's going to take practice to get there. So we highly, highly recommend looking into self-testing. And it's not like you only have to do self-testing either. So this sort of study and practice, this is a great way to ease into the content. When you're first introduced to a new topic, there's nothing wrong with, going through your notes and getting help because, it doesn't have to start off super difficult. So starting off with the study and practice and looking at your notes is completely fine. But you want to make sure that you do take the time to self-test at least before your exams, because that way you'll be kind of aware of, okay, what type of questions do I need to practice? Am I really prepared for this exam? If not, how much more studying do I need to do? Essentially, self-testing is a great way to inform yourself of where you are in the course and what you need to be prepared for that exam. So another thing we always recommend is kind of tracking your performance. So again, with self-testing, this can be really useful. So this is just one way of doing it. So here are the different topics. So we've got limits, critical points, local extrema, absolute extrema. And then you have your different self-testing points. So there's 3 self-tests and the night before an exam. So self-test 1, so the student has gone through and done these closed book problems. What they found is they did fine on the critical points question, but it turns out that they need a bit more practice on limits, local extrema, and absolute extrema. All right. So they take some time in between self-test 1 and self-test 2. And that time, they're probably reviewing their notes on the concepts that they found difficult, doing some practice problems, maybe their open book as well, just so they make sure they kind of have a breakdown of how to get through those problems. So then they do self-test 2. And you know what? They're seeing an improvement. So they're still doing great on critical points, but they've also mastered limits and local extrema. The only kind of pinch point here is the absolute extrema. So they, repeat the process where maybe they spend a bit more time studying absolute extrema and just focusing on the notes for that, probably still doing a couple of practice questions for these other concepts, because again, making sure to continually practice and review content is always good, even if it's content you feel good about. So they hit self-test 3. So they've got absolute extrema, but they actually didn't do well on limits again. And sometimes that happens, learning is a process and sometimes it can really be up and down. The important thing is they now know, okay, I am going to practice limits again. So night before, okay, they've got limits again, but it looks like still kind of a shaky hold on absolute extrema. Probably this is something that they've predicted because it's something that they've struggled with so far, and that's okay. It's still the night before the exam, so they do have some time to continue to get ready. They've gotten it before, so chances are they can still get it in time for the exam. So yeah, tracking your performance is a great way, again, of just keeping track of, okay, what topic am I struggling with and what ones can I maybe spend less time studying on? So for example, critical points, they do really well on, so they'll probably have minimal questions dedicated to that and spend more time on the stuff that they have more difficulty with. So this next section is revolving around what happens if something isn't going well. So first year can sometimes be challenging, and that's okay. We have stuff here in Schulich that is made to support our students. So again, we've gone over this, but we have our learning assistants. So they're here semester round, and they'll be here in the winter semester too. All of our first year courses are supported by tutoring. Again, completely free. Please come in. It's there for your students, and it's better to come in with questions as early as you can, because the more you're on top of things, the less you'll fall behind. Another thing we have are our peer assisted study sessions. So we will post up the schedule for that too, once that is ready. And again, that's just a fantastic place. This is also student led. So it's a great space to study with your peers and do some exam and midterm prep. The nice thing about both of these, of course, they're both completely free, but they're also supported by our instructors too. So stamp of approval from your profs. So no worries about academic misconduct. We also have our academic development appointments. So again, me and Destiny are happy to meet with students and talk about things. And there are also, again, your professor's office hours, which those office hours exist so that the professors can connect with their students and help them if they're struggling. So if you have questions for your professor, it is encouraged that you go into the office hours and ask those questions. Again, with our learning assistants, free drop-in learning support throughout the week, and also peer-to-peer. So another nice thing about the learning assistants is that being that they're upper year students, they've been through first year of engineering. And so like they can also give you kind of great advice on how to get through first year in general, even if it's not, a specific course questions. The great thing about them is they'll happily connect with you kind of over, yeah, first year can be tough. These are the classes I didn't really do the greatest in, but you know what? I got through it and you can too. So just to kind of quickly go over, learning assistants, they are able to help with specific course content questions. They can also help walk you through practice problems, and they can also answer questions regarding concepts, theories, and equations. What they cannot do is do your homework for you. Please do not ask them to help you with any graded assignments, because that's kind of out of the scope of the role. They can help you with maybe related concepts and theories, but they cannot do your homework or assignments. They're also not going to tell you the answer. They can help walk you through practice problems, but they're not going to be here to kind of just give you the answers to things, as well as mediate group project dynamics. So if you're having kind of difficulties with any sort of group projects, please reach out to your instructor, because they're the ones who can kind of help mediate in those situations. That is not a role for learning assistants. Again, peer assisted group study, free. Again, these are upper year students, so students who understand and went through the same first year that you did. So they're full of awesome and valuable advice. Free midterm and final review sessions. And this is something that we found, data we found in our students. So students who attended 5 or more of these sessions in one course, they saw a full letter grade improvement over their peers that did not attend. So that's a significant, difference. So these are very effective ways to study. And, even if you can't attend 5 or more, just try to attend a couple, because it's just a really great way to get some studying in. It's a great way to meet some of your other peers in the program. And it does work. It does help students succeed in their courses. We also have our ADS appointments. So Janelle has helpfully put our email in the chat, which is easc@ucalgary.ca. So for our academic advising appointments, these are 45 minutes. They are one-on-one, so it would just be us and you don't have to, it's very like confidential and private, so you don't have to worry about anyone else. It is an appointment only basis, so please do email us if you want to meet and we can set up a time, completely free. It's also student driven, so we're here to kind of help you. So it's very much based on what it is you want to get out of the session. It's based on how you are as a learner. And we are located in the Engineering Student Center. So where the academic advisors are is where you'll find me and Destiny. And these are just some of the common topics that students will talk to us about. So things like time management, procrastination, exam anxiety, note-taking, focus, self-care, learning environment, homesickness, getting involved, online learning, exam prep, goal setting, error for learning, communication strategies. We have a wide variety of different strategies that can be applied to these. We also can sometimes help you come up with kind of unique strategies that fit with your situation. Essentially, it's a very case by case thing. So whatever it is you need help with, we encourage that you reach out. And like the nice thing is, even if it's not necessarily something that me or Destiny can help you with, we can always send you to a person who can help you. So in cases like getting involved on campus, we are happy to show you how to connect with the different clubs, different student societies. So yeah, we're here. We're here to give you like resources as needed or work with you on an individual basis. Whatever it is essentially that you need to succeed, we will do our best to help you. So another thing to know about is for academic advising. So academic advising specifically revolves around things like knowing what courses you need to take, knowing your degree progression, if there's any issues with the courses that you're taking, in terms of like scheduling. Our advisors are like a great set of people who really want to help you guys out. So the way our students kind of line up for advising is we do drop-in hours. So we do it through the QList app, and you join either in-person or remote advising lineups, just depending on what's offered. We offer a mix of both at different times. So yeah, you shouldn't have any issue essentially, because there'll be at least one time that works for you. So if you're in line for in-person advising, that's going to be in ENC 205. If you're in line for virtual advising, then that will be via Zoom. So for in-person advising, just make sure that when you get a QList notification that you show up to ENC 205, and one of our front desk staff will lead you right to the advisor who's working with you. If you're doing remote advising, you sign up or join the line via email. And essentially, once you get to the front of the QList line, you'll get sent a link to the Zoom chat, and that's where you'll meet with the advisor. So Janelle has helpfully put in the chat, this is where the different advising times are listed, and advising can vary by semester. Like I said earlier, right on that D2L page, we are going to have a list essentially of the different, we're going to have updates of when advising times, shift and change. Next week, I believe most of our advising is in person, but again, just double check on D2L because those times will be listed there as well as in this link. If your question is maybe a quicker one or one that you don't need to meet with an advisor with, you're always welcome to email enginfo@ucalgary.ca. Again, please do this via your UCalgary email address. And again, please include your UCID on it. It's very helpful to us if we can actually take a look at your specific file, just because, our advice is going to be dependent on who you are and what your progress in your courses is. So please have that UCID in there. So be specific. And I mean, if it turns out that your question is a little bit too complex for email, we'll let you know if, you should come in for advising. Another thing to know about email is that we generally strive to answer between 3 to 5 business days. So if you don't get a response in the first day, no problem. We'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. And that essentially kind of wraps up what it is that we were hoping to discuss today. So this was a pretty kind of quick overview, I guess, of the D2L shells, what your block schedules are going to be, and kind of our expectations of how you use that time, as well as just some study strategies. So I'll look into having this PowerPoint sent out as well, because I think it's probably really useful to see that. But at the very least, we are recording this, and we will send out a link to the recording for anyone who couldn't stick around, or just if you wanted to review any of the information here. Again, as posted earlier, me and Destiny are here at the EASC in order to help kind of in terms of academic support. And we have a great advising team over at the Engineering Student Center who can help if you have any questions regarding your kind of courses or registration. So yeah, I think that kind of covers everything we had to discuss today. Thank you all so much for attending. If you have any kind of last minute questions, you can put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, though, if you have no questions, then you're free to head out.
I'm going to jump in here, Hager, quickly, because there were some definite general questions being asked that weren't specific to this topic. So just to confirm, and I put it in the chat, September 5th is a holiday. The university is not opened. So courses and attendance, etc., do not start that day. The 6th to the 9th is going to be a large information session on how your year is going to look. This is specific and only to engineering. Okay, so your courses technically don't start next week. You need to be here next week. If you have reasons you're not in the city, the country, wherever, you need to identify us that to Eng Info, because there is an additional process, but it is an in-person sessions next week. An email went out on Tuesday, 2 of them kind of explaining this, and I've put in the FAQs in the chats as well. Again, next week is a different looking week, but it is a week that you need to be here and available. So you need to look at that schedule and understand it. The 12th is when your courses start. And again, you're in the block, so you need to know what block you're in. That information will be in the D2L, the FAQs typically, and I'm going to say that hesitantly, usually the lecture you're in is the block number you're in. That's a good way to guess it, but it is not always right. So just make sure you check. And if you don't understand, please review the FAQs that I put in the chat and the 2 emails that went out earlier this week explaining kind of what your first week looks like. Please note, engineering is very different. This first active learning week is just information on what it's going to look like. So I got a lot of questions in the Q&A about how are my online courses? Why is my Monday empty? What is this? Those will all be reviewed to you next week. Okay, so orientation is on Friday. That's just going to be a general orientation on the university. Okay, your active learning sessions, your engineering sessions will be reviewed to you next week. And I'm going to just try to get through some more of the general sessions information. The UniCard, that is an independent department. So I put the information in the chat. So just click on them. They have the answers that way. Friday's orientation is not going to be hosted online because it is honestly learning the university and it's not going to be posted, but we do have ways to help you. So if you're not going to be here, if you can't be here, there are tools that we can send to you to get to know the university. The university has a virtual room finder. So if you're having questions what ENG, whatever stands for, EN is engineering, G is the block you're in, and then your room number. So you can find that information in your schedule and in the block information. So I'm going to try to burn through these questions now. So again, next week, your active learning part is actually probably not active learning. It is probably an in-person component to explain to you in detail what active learning is. The orientation, so I'm not sure if the schedule is unclear. There's a university portion and then an engineering portion at 10:30, and then a lot of interactive activities from 12 on. So I guess if there's some misunderstanding, there'll be lots of people around on Friday to help you. I think I put a link into the orientation in the chat as well. So again, Monday is a holiday and your block weeks don't, like your Courses don't start. It is next week is a review session on your active learning. If you didn't get a scarf, usually the Engineering Students Society will have them after orientation day. We will get you one. Don't worry about it. Where this D2L posting or where this recording will be most probably in both D2Ls, the first year D2L that is just for you guys, and then also the Engineering Student Center D2L, which is for all students who are with engineering. So that'll be one you'll have access through for the whole 4 years. So we'll duplicate it and try to post it once it's reviewed along with the slide deck. I'm just burning through some of the questions that I have, and bear with me if I had some typos. I was trying to type as much quick as I could in the chat. So some people are asking about the live streaming sessions for the courses. Again, that'll be all explained to you next week. Some courses have live streaming sessions, some courses have pre-recorded. So you'll have to figure out, that'll be explained more. Math is doing some of their pre-recorded sessions while other people are doing live. Everybody's schedule, the blocks are all a little bit different. So you may have different holes in your schedule. Remember, you're typically need to be at school Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, 8 to 5. You may not be in class, but there is some assigned time that is your self-study time because we've had to assign that. So because you have a hole, it doesn't mean you're going to the movies. You actually have to usually use that time for the self-study component of the active learning. Some of the course outlines, course syllabuses, that's where you're going to find all your books and your information. But again, that'll be on, and each course will also have a D2L shell. Okay, so you're not going to only have the Engineering Student Center D2L, you're going to have a first year D2L, and then each course you're in will have a D2L shell with that information. Okay, those can be updated as late as next week. So if it's not there, if you're not seeing it, give it next week. If you're not on it, send EngInfo an email and we will make sure you're added to the appropriate shells. Again, lots of questions about what is the active learning. That'll be really gone into detail next week. No, again, the 6th, you don't go to your class as per your schedule. You review that email about next week being very different. It's always in class. Your active learning is typically in a class setup. Yeah, there's a group. Again, I'm burning through these. Hopefully I can get through them as quickly as I can. If you cannot get into Canada, please identify yourself to EngInfo at UCalgary. There is a process in place for students who have documentation issues. You need to identify yourselves, however, to us. There was 2 surveys that went out that were really important. If you haven't done those, please do so. If not, identify yourself through EngInfo, as you will be having a completely different kind of explanation of your process until you're able to join us in person. What will be happening before the 12th? I think I've answered that one. I'm not sure if anything, I don't know, Hager, do you know anything that's happening as per Eng for tomorrow's session? I know Friday's orientation. I don't know anything about.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not really aware about anything happening tomorrow. So
yeah, there's a few individual sessions. So if you were invited to something, it is most probably because you're in some specific group, whether it's a scholarship or different admissions or something. So if you haven't received anything, you're not missing anything. Our big orientation is started on Friday. It's full day. So lots of events going on. As I said, there's a university session, there's an Eng session at 10:30, and then there's some interactive. People were asking about the maker space and those things. You're going to find all of that information out on Friday. And then the specifics to your learning and your first year of engineering will be reviewed next week. I think there is also, I put in the link, like the orientation information, I put that in the chat. So if you go to our Schulich website, honestly, if you Google anything off the Schulich site, and I'll throw that in, it will most probably get you to where you were. I had some questions on scholarships. I had some questions on clubs. So I tried to throw that in as much as I can. But if you go into our website, and I'll throw that in the chat, you should be able to Google the information you want. Yeah, if you still have filled in the forms, please just email Info to just self-identify again, because if you haven't received the process, then that probably means something got missed there. So there was 2 emails that went out on Tuesday explaining what your first week of classes look like. I think it's really important. One was from Dr. Kim Johnson, which explains pretty clearly what next week looks like. And then the other one was actually scheduling what your next week's of scheduling looks like. If you did not receive that, please email Info, because that is what your next week's schedule is supposed to look like. Okay. Again, it's not going to classes, it's attending the active learning schedule. Yeah, like I said, somebody said, I'm sure there's going to be some important information that's going to be given to you. So you do need to attend next week. That's where you're actually going to meet some of your professors, meet the deans, meet those people, and see the room, stuff like that. So you still do need to attend. If you can't attend for unforeseen reasons, you need to let us know. But it is an expectation that you will be at school on the 6th. Okay, so again, I'm not going to get too much into what the active learning looks like, because that will be explained to you all next week. Let's just put it, there probably won't be any quizzes next week, but there is required, attendance, meaning you may not be learning engineering skills just yet. You'll be learning how to go through the engineering first year. And because it's a little bit different, no other faculty does it this way. They take that first week of classes to explain all the questions that I'm seeing. So I'm not going to go into all of them, but I am going to just again review the email that you have received from the Engineering Student Center. Is most probably from Info, and those are 2 very detailed emails, but they do have all the information there. I'm reading through the Q&A, so I'll keep reading. Orientation is on Friday, which is September 1st. I don't have anything scheduled for, like I said, unless you were given something special to attend tomorrow. Orientation is Friday. That is not mandatory. It's obviously beneficial to you to get to know the university a little bit better, get to meet your cohorts, etc. But that is not a mandatory. School starts on the 6th. So we're coming up on our end of our time here right away. Okay, I'm just getting there. Okay. Yeah, well, okay. Perfect. Basically, I was just being told, please come to school next week. Okay. It's really important that you are there and you attend. Okay. So we're coming up to the end of the session. Hager did a great job at kind of transitioning you into the supports as a student. I'm more, and Hager's more kind of academic advising kind of information. I'll be answering the Info. And again, I was the one on the Q&A typing back to you. So if I had spelling mistakes or confusion, I'm sorry. I was typing as quickly as I could. Join us for QLIS advising if you need to. And I think we just look forward to welcoming everybody in person on Friday if you can make it, and the following week if not. Hager, got anything? Info, yeah, Info, the EASC email. Please email us. We're here to help you.
Please email us. Double check your emails too for any of that information that Janelle was mentioning. And I mean, if you're super confused, you can also send us an email and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can.
And someone just advised Friday is September 2nd, and that is when you are coming to orientation. So if I said the 1st, Thursday has nothing. Friday had September 2nd is the orientation. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.